Hi everybody. I want to address the question here that we had. I saw on Facebook about the Jamaican English, Jamaican Creole English, and the idea of where we are right now with the current issue where we are with it. And I want to support really what Hubert said about it's all about an implementation issue. It's not about having all the raw stuff done, everything that's all been done. And it makes me think about, it goes back 30 years, Hubert. When we were working on that book, Vernacularization a bit of literacy with, Robert LePage, and that was my kind of introduction, working with a lot of you, with Lawrence and with Pauline and everybody. And we were talking about, these issues in the Caribbean. And then there was also 1999, I said it was 1996 when Pauline's edited book came out, was Caribbean Language Issues, Old and New. I did a review of the book, and in that book you specifically had a chapter about the different types of orthographies you can find. And I found the same thing when I was working on my thesis. You find this in posters and different places. We're going to have different types of spelling systems that are used. But a lot of that's already been kind of worked out, right? And just as you said, these current spelling systems and literacy are not something that take hundreds of years, as they did for all these other, languages like French and Spanish and German and whatever, which took literally centuries to put in place, and with a lot longer, a lot more development, a lot more thinking, a lot more politics involved. And if we think about the Caribbean languages, even though there were some writing of them that we have traces of going back a couple hundred years, that people will go do research on to see if it was written some way. Really, the majority of the stuff is really after 1900. All the real focus on spelling systems and orthography. There were attempts before, right? But it was really after the beginning of the 1900s where there's a real effort to begin to do this, and even the 1950s on, when there were a lot, the 1940s on, and when there were certain linguists were getting involved and all that. And I think that the key thing here is, here we're talking about decades, and as you said, it can be even less than decades. It could be months. And I would say even it can take days. Some of these things can happen in days. I'm not saying that everything happens in days, but some of these things do happen in days. If we think about, the whole automated translation thing with Haitian Creole, we did it in 5 days, right? Then when I did with Google, or with Microsoft Translator and then Google, it was within days, literally. I had already done the work, but when we implemented it, it took days. And to be able to implement some of these spelling systems, orthographies into, like I suggested in my talk at Microsoft, to do this in Firefox, to do it in Firefox, or do it in Internet Explorer, to take all these spelling systems and the words and put them into some of the software, to just what we call, translate the software, menu items and everything. I don't know what we call it, localized, but let's say translate. Make these software applications to be available themselves in any of these Creole languages. Once we have the established words and everything, it takes days. And once you do that, then it's just people start adopting it, right? In principle. I'm not saying it's going to be that easy. But it's easy to bypass a lot of the government's kind of decisions, all that. I think it's just going through ministers of education stuff it's a long process. That's what takes the decades or the centuries. The centuries takes just political leaders being removed and then replaced by another king or something. But the decades of work, if we think about just St. Lucian Creole, St. Lucian French Creole. I'm going to say French just to make it simple, right? So St. Lucian French Creole has just been recently so-called given the status of being able to be used in the education system. Well, that's a statement. Whether or not it's going to be implemented is another thing. And St. Lucian Creole, the French one, not the English one, is much more, is less developed along the orthography lines and everything than is Jamaican English, right? Or Jamaican Creole. Jamaican Creole has had a lot more work done it, by a lot of people. You get the Bible in it, at least the New Testament, right? I can't remember if the whole Bible might have at least the New Testament. That was announced just a couple years ago. Add to that just all the work done at UWI, right? The West Indies. Just so many people, the whole language learning there. It's a lot of people doing field work. For St. Lucian, I mean, it was Lawrence Carrington, and then I came along, and then Paul Garrett came along, and there were a few of us, and then it's got a few people, and then there was the Folk Research Center too, because the Folk Research Center, and there was the SIL team, right? There were a few of us working in St. Lucian French Creole, just a few. And the Folk Research Center had done a lot of stuff. I recall there was a fire, so that didn't help. There was the kind of the Balaton, all the newspaper and all that, but the amount of work that was done publication-wise and fieldwork-wise was a limited amount of people, and there hasn't been a significant amount of stuff. So again, out for St. Lucian, though it's declared to be education system, all that, whether or not it be implemented, that's going to be decades of kind of decision making, unless we go ahead and, if I go some crazy thing and decide that we're gonna translate everything into all of the Facebook menu items and the Microsoft apps and Firefox and Safari, and put all those into St. Lucian Creole, French Creole, then that'll speed it up immediately, right? Because then all the people will be using it because they have it right in their face. That's a lot of work. That's the implementation part. It could be done. It could be done in days, but it just needs the right people. It needs the funding, right? It needs the funding to be able to do it, and the motivation. So I really do agree that all it does come down to the implementation. And some of these implementations are blocked by funding. That's kind of been a lot of thing with Haitian Creole. I'm kind of jumping back and giving different examples because I've worked on these other ones and worked on the implementation parts, and it's really hard. I think I'd say only two of the years I've been working on myself. I've been assisting. I'm not the leader of this. I'm just assisting, right? In working on, let's see, the Creole languages in the Caribbean. I think I've been working, I'm going to say 35 years, okay? Just under that, maybe. I'm going to round it up. And a little under, between 32 and 35 years, right? And now we're getting to a point where, and Haitian Creoles develop a lot, but then look, it just doesn't get the traction, right? A lot of things because of political stability, because of the economic situation, not a whole lot of money, and that's just all these things factor into the whole thing of whether or not these can get the right opportunity, just like the other languages, I don't want to call them majority languages, but let's call them major languages that have funding, right? This is kind of the next step, and it's the implementation. I do agree, and it's not so easy. Some of these just take a long time. Well, they can't go really fast. They just need the hardest work is getting the funding, or the traction, or getting the right people to make decisions. And sometimes you got to go around that, and sometimes you do go around it. Usually crises like earthquakes help to do that. So like the whole thing in the medical phrase book that we did in Haitian Creole was like done in 2 days, right? For Doctors Without Borders. A lot of this can be done really quickly. And usually, like the whole Ukrainian crisis now, allows for doing gets a boost for a period of time. So unfortunately, a lot of these crises, kind of public health, or it's disaster relief. They're the ones that actually make these things happen, right? That's an unfortunate part of it. So how to be able to do it without disasters is the big challenge, and then be able to do it where we got to bug back to our Jim at Sydney restaurant talking here. So this is an opportunity where I get to do these things. But how we do it, is going to be the critical thing, and what are the steps to be able to make it practical, and use what has already been done for decades by many people, especially Jamaican English, Jamaican Creole. It's just, there's a lot of you have been working on it, so it's not just putting into place, right? Getting the rubber hits the road and do it. And I myself think that you need to go around getting educate ministers and to do this, an education system do it. It's just to find shortcuts that will get people to adopt it, and it's on software. That's the software apps are the way to do it. Now getting the right people to be motivated to be able to drive this and to do it, that's another story. So that's the biggest challenge. And getting the people to keep the motivation for a long period of time is another challenge. That's a challenge for the current generation to kind of handle. So yeah, keep going forth it. Keep striving for it. That's what you've been doing for all your career. I've been following you, and I really respect everything you've done. And just glad I get to kind of help along the side, pushing for it and trying to make all these databases and apps kind of work. But I'm looking forward to more Caribbean people from the Caribbean actually taking these things on, as I get to kind of just have been part of the process. That's all, for just being motivated and kind of driven it. But I don't want to be known